The restaurant was already full when the evening lights softened and the city outside began to glow. Crystal glasses caught the light. Cutlery rested neatly on white tablecloths. Low music played in the background, the kind meant to sound expensive without anyone really listening to it. People spoke in calm voices, careful not to disturb the image of comfort they had paid for. Most of the guests looked like they belonged there. Men in tailored jackets, women in dresses that cost more than a month's rent for some. The staff moved smoothly between tables, trained to notice everything while appearing invisible. Near the back of the room stood a grand piano. It was polished and clean, more like decoration than an instrument meant to be used. Many guests had passed it without a second glance. It had been there for years, mostly silent, played only on special nights by hired musicians. At one of the best tables sat a man known for his wealth and influence. He dined there often. The staff knew his preferences. The chefs knew how he liked his food, and the manager always made sure his table was perfect. He enjoyed the attention but never openly asked for it. He believed it was simply what his status deserved. He was in the middle of a conversation when the entrance door opened again. A young woman stepped inside. She paused just long enough to take in the room, not with excitement, not with fear, but with quiet awareness. Her clothes were simple, clean, but clearly worn many times. She carried no expensive bag, no sign of luxury. To anyone watching closely, she looked slightly out of place, like someone who had walked into the wrong world by mistake. A few heads turned, not because she was loud or rude, but because she was different. People noticed differences quickly in places like this. She walked forward slowly, her steps measured, as if she did not want to disturb anyone. A waiter approached her with polite caution, the kind reserved for unexpected guests. "Good evening," he said. She smiled lightly and nodded. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft but steady. "Good evening." The waiter asked if she had a reservation. She shook her head. "No, I was hoping to speak to someone about the piano." The waiter blinked, confused. "The piano?" "Yes," she said, glancing toward the corner. "Is it ever played?" The question alone felt strange in this place. A few people nearby overheard and exchanged looks. The waiter hesitated, unsure how to respond. He had been asked many things before, but never that dot at the rich man's table. The conversation slowed. He noticed the pause, the slight disruption in the smooth flow of the evening. His eyes followed the waiter's gaze and landed on the woman. He studied her without trying to hide it. She didn't look like someone who would ask about a grand piano in a high-end restaurant. She didn't look like someone who belonged on that bench. In his mind, the conclusion came quickly and without effort. She was probably curious, or pretending, or hoping for attention. He leaned back in his chair, lips tightening slightly, not in anger but in amusement. He had seen this before, people trying to step into spaces they didn't understand. The waiter excused himself politely and walked toward the manager's desk. The woman remained standing near the entrance, hands clasped loosely in front of her. She did not fidget. She did not look embarrassed. She simply waited. That calmness unsettled some of the guests more than nervousness would have. The manager approached, his smile professional but cautious. "Good evening," he said. "How can I help you?" She repeated her question, her voice unchanged. "I was wondering if I could play the piano, just for a short while." The manager glanced around the room. He could feel the attention, subtle but heavy. This was not something that happened often. This was not something listed in any rulebook. "Are you a musician?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. That was all. No explanation, no story, no proof offered. The rich man watched closely now. A faint smile crossed his face, the kind that came when he already believed he knew how things would end. In his world, talent usually announced itself early and loudly, supported by money, connections, and confidence. This woman had none of those signs. He murmured something to the person across from him, a quiet comment filled with doubt. They both chuckled softly, careful not to draw attention. Around the room, whispers grew. Some guests were curious, others were clearly annoyed. This was supposed to be a peaceful evening, not a surprise performance by a stranger. The manager cleared his throat. "We usually have scheduled players," he said carefully, "and our guests expect a certain standard." "I understand," she said. "If it's not possible, that's fine." Her words carried no disappointment, no pleading. That, more than anything, made the moment stretch longer. The manager hesitated again. He looked toward the piano, then toward the tables. His eyes briefly met the rich man's. The man raised his glass slightly, a small gesture that could be read as permission or challenge. It didn't matter which. The manager felt pressure either way, just one piece. The manager finally said, very short. A ripple of reaction passed through the room. The woman nodded. Thank you. She walked toward the piano. As she crossed the floor, eyes followed her. Some looked with interest, some with doubt, some with quiet judgment. Her shoes made almost no sound against the polished surface. When she reached the piano bench, she paused. For a brief moment, she placed her hand on the edge of the instrument, not possessively, almost respectfully, as if greeting an old friend. The rich man leaned forward slightly now. He expected awkwardness, wrong notes, an embarrassing attempt that would confirm what he already believed. He had seen many people fail when they reached beyond their place. The woman sat down. She adjusted the bench with practiced ease. That small movement caught the attention of a few guests who knew instruments well enough to notice. Still, no one spoke. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath before touching the keys. She closed her eyes for just a second. Not long enough to seem dramatic, just long enough to settle herself. The rich man scoffed quietly under his breath. To him, this looked like an act, a performance before the performance. He lifted his glass again, already bored, already certain of the outcome. The room was still loud enough with forks and quiet conversations. No one had asked for silence. No one expected what was about to happen. Her fingers hovered above the keys, and then, the first note was played, clear, steady, confident. A few nearby conversations paused without people realizing why. The sound was not loud, but it carried. It was clean, controlled, and intentional. The woman's posture changed slightly as she played. Not stiff, not tense, but focused. Her hands moved with purpose, not hesitation. The rich man frowned, just a little. This was not what he had expected. Another note followed, then another, each one placed exactly where it should be. Not rushed, not uncertain. The music did not beg for attention. It earned it. Forks slowed. Voices lowered. Someone at a nearby table turned fully in their chair. The rich man set his glass down without noticing he had done so. He leaned back again, but this time not in confidence. This time in surprise. The woman continued to play, unaware or unconcerned with the shift in the room. For her, the restaurant faded away. There was only the piano and the story she was beginning to tell through it. And though no one yet knew where the music would lead, one thing had already become clear. The quiet woman everyone had judged was not here by accident. The first notes floated through the restaurant like a soft question. They were not loud enough to demand attention, yet clear enough to be noticed. At first, only a few people stopped what they were doing. A fork paused halfway to a mouth. A glass was set down a little more slowly than usual. The woman continued to play, her fingers moving smoothly across the keys. There was no rush in her movements, no sign of nerves. Each note felt placed with care, as if she knew exactly where it belonged. Some guests tried to return to their conversations, but their words began to lose shape. Sentences broke off. People leaned slightly toward the sound without meaning to. The music was doing something strange. It was pulling attention without forcing it. At the rich man's table, silence slowly replaced talk. He watched her now, his eyes fixed on her hands. He had expected mistakes, a wrong note, a pause of panic, but none came. He told himself it was too early to judge. The music shifted gently, growing fuller. What started as a simple melody began to open into something deeper. There was emotion in it, but not the kind that begged for sympathy. It sounded like memory, like someone telling a story they knew well. A woman at a nearby table wiped her hands on her napkin and turned fully toward the piano. She didn't know why she felt drawn in. She only knew she didn't want to miss whatever came next. The waiter who had first spoken to the woman stood frozen near the wall. He had planned to stay only a moment, but his feet refused to move. He had worked there for years and had heard many skilled players. This felt different. The rich man shifted in his chair. His earlier smile had disappeared. In its place was a tight expression, one he rarely showed in public. It wasn't anger, it was discomfort, the kind that comes when confidence starts to crack. He glanced around the room. Everyone was watching now. The manager stood near the bar, hands clasped together. He had expected complaints by this point. Instead, the room felt calmer than it had all evening. Even the staff moved more carefully, as if afraid to break the moment. The woman at the piano remained focused. Her face was relaxed, her eyes mostly on the keys. Every now and then, she lifted her gaze slightly, not toward the audience, but somewhere beyond them. As if the music was guiding her forward, the sound grew stronger, filling the space without becoming overwhelming. It carried warmth, then sadness, then something close to hope. People felt it differently, each in their own way. The rich man's chest tightened. He didn't understand why. He had heard better pianos, better halls, better performers. Yet this felt closer, too close. A memory surfaced, unwanted and sudden. A time long ago when he had wanted something deeply, but was told he didn't fit. He pushed the thought away quickly, annoyed at himself. The woman played on. Her hands moved faster now, confident and precise. There was no show in it, no dramatic lifting of arms, just skill, built through countless hours of practice. A quiet gasp came from one of the tables near the piano when she moved into a difficult passage. Someone who understood music recognized it immediately. This was not beginner's luck. This was training. The rich man leaned forward again, elbows resting on the table. His food had gone untouched. He no longer noticed the taste of the room, the service, or the status that once made him feel secure. He only saw the woman, and he realized something he did not like. He had been wrong. The realization didn't come gently. It landed heavy, pressing against his pride. He had judged her within seconds, based on her clothes, her silence, her place in the room. Now, the room belonged to her. The music softened again, pulling back like a breath after a long sentence. Some guests exhaled without realizing they had been holding it in. The woman's shoulders relaxed slightly as she moved into the final part of the piece. There was tenderness in her playing now, a sense of gratitude, maybe even relief. A couple near the window reached for each other's hands. Another guest closed their eyes. Someone at the bar lowered their phone, forgetting why they had taken it out. The rich man felt something twist inside him. He had spent years surrounding himself with control and certainty. This moment offered neither. When the final note was played, it lingered in the air longer than sound should. No one spoke. The woman's hands rested on the keys for a brief moment. Then she lifted them slowly, as if careful not to disturb the silence she had created. She sat still, waiting for a second. It seemed the room didn't know what to do next. Applause felt too loud. Words felt wrong. Then someone clapped. One clap turned into several. Several turned into many. The sound grew, warm and genuine, filling the restaurant in a way no music had that evening. People smiled at strangers. Heads nodded in approval. The waiter near the wall felt his eyes sting. The woman stood up, surprised by the reaction but not overwhelmed. She gave a small bow, her face showing gratitude rather than pride. The rich man joined the applause last. His hands moved slowly, reluctantly at first, then with more force, not because he felt pressured, but because something inside him demanded it. As the clapping faded, conversation returned in soft waves. But it was different now, lighter, more open. The woman stepped away from the piano bench. She did not seek attention. She did not wait for praise. She simply walked back toward where she had entered. The manager hurried after her. "That was impressive," he said, clearly searching for the right words. "Thank you for letting me play." She replied. "May I ask where you trained?" He said. She smiled gently. "Wherever I could." That answer stayed with him. Across the room, the rich man watched her closely. The urge to speak to her rose inside him, unfamiliar and uncomfortable. He wasn't used to feeling the need to explain himself. As she reached the entrance, she paused, not because she was unsure, but because she felt something. She turned back. Her eyes met his. There was no challenge in her gaze, no victory, just quiet awareness. In that moment, he understood something deeper than embarrassment. He had mistaken silence for weakness, and as she walked out into the night, leaving the room changed behind her, he knew this evening was not over yet. Not for him. The door closed softly behind her, and the restaurant slowly returned to movement. Chairs shifted, glasses clinked again, conversations restarted, but none of them sounded the same as before. Something had changed, even if no one said it out loud. The rich man remained seated, his eyes still fixed on the place where she had disappeared. He did not pick up his fork. The food in front of him had grown cold, but he barely noticed. His mind replayed the music again and again, each note stirring thoughts he had avoided for years. Across the room, people spoke in low voices about what they had just witnessed. Some wondered who she was. Others guessed where she had learned to play like that. A few admitted they had expected her to fail. The manager stood near the bar, still unsettled. He prided himself on control and order. Yet this unexpected moment had slipped past every rule he knew, and somehow, it had made the evening better. The rich man finally stood up. Those at nearby tables noticed. When he moved, people usually paid attention. He adjusted his jacket, not because it needed it, but because he needed something to do with his hands. He walked toward the entrance, ignoring the curious looks that followed him. For once, he did not enjoy being watched outside. The night air was cooler. The city hummed with distant sounds of traffic and life moving forward. Near the entrance, he spotted her standing under a streetlight. She wasn't in a hurry. She looked as if she was simply letting the night settle around her. He stopped a few steps away. She sensed him before he spoke and turned calmly. Her face showed no surprise. "I wanted to thank you," he said. The words sounded strange to him. He rarely thanked strangers, especially not ones he had doubted. She nodded. "You're welcome." There was a pause. He struggled to fill it. Silence usually made others uncomfortable around him. This time, it unsettled him instead. "I didn't expect that," he admitted. She studied him for a moment, not with judgment, but with curiosity. Most people don't. Her honesty caught him off guard. There was no bitterness in her voice, only truth. He cleared his throat. "You play very well, thank you," she said again. Another pause followed. The streetlight buzzed faintly overhead. "I may have misjudged you," he said finally. She smiled, small and understanding. "That happens." He frowned slightly. "You don't seem angry." She shook her head. "I've learned not to be." Something in her words stayed with him. He wanted to ask more, but pride held him back. "Where did you learn to play like that?" he asked instead. She looked past him toward the street, as if choosing her words carefully. "Different places, different times. I practiced wherever I could." "That piano," he said, nodding toward the restaurant. "It's not an easy one." She smiled again. "None of them are." He let out a quiet breath. He wasn't sure why this conversation mattered so much to him, but it did. "I hope you keep playing," he said. "I will," she replied without hesitation. With that, she nodded politely and walked away, disappearing into the city like a passing moment he could not hold on to. He stood there longer than he should have. Inside, the restaurant buzzed again, but he no longer felt at home in it. When he returned to his table, the people with him asked where he had gone. He gave vague answers, his thoughts elsewhere. That night, he went home restless. Sleep did not come easily. When it finally did, it was shallow and filled with dreams of unfinished melodies and missed chances. The next morning, he woke earlier than usual. The city outside his window looked different somehow, less predictable. At breakfast, he barely touched his food again. His assistant noticed but said nothing. On the drive to his office, he passed a small park. A familiar sound reached his ears. Piano music. He asked the driver to stop. In the corner of the park stood an old upright piano, weathered and chipped. A few people had gathered around it, and there she was. She played with the same focus, the same calm presence. Children sat cross-legged on the ground. An elderly man leaned on his cane, smiling. A woman with tired eyes listened as if the music was giving her rest. The rich man watched from a distance. There was no restaurant here, no expensive plates, no silent rules. Yet the music felt even stronger. He stepped closer. When she finished, the small crowd clapped, loud and joyful. She laughed softly, a sound he had not heard before. Their eyes met again. "You followed the music," she said. He nodded. "I guess I did." They sat on a nearby bench. This time, the silence felt easier. "I come here often," she said. People listened differently outside. He looked around at the faces still lingering. "They seem grateful." "They are," she replied. Music reaches people when they're not trying to impress anyone. He thought of the restaurant, of himself. "Why not play in bigger places?" he asked. She shrugged. "I have. But this feels honest." That word struck him. They talked longer this time. About practice. About struggle. About moments when quitting felt easier than continuing. She spoke of long nights, borrowed instruments, and playing for empty rooms. She did not complain. She simply told her story. He listened more than he spoke. For the first time in years, he felt like a student again. When they parted, something had shifted inside him. At work, he found himself distracted. Meetings felt hollow. Numbers blurred together. He thought about how quickly he had judged her and how often he had done the same to others. Days passed. He returned to the park more than once, sometimes finding her there, sometimes not. When she was, they spoke. When she wasn't, he listened to the quiet and thought. One afternoon, he brought coffee for both of them. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know," he replied. He began asking questions he had never asked before. About talent, about chance, about how many people were never given the space to show who they really were. She answered honestly. People decide quickly, she said. It saves them effort. He nodded slowly. It cost me more than I realized. She looked at him. What you do next matters more. Those words stayed with him long after they parted that day. That evening, back in his office, he stared out at the city lights. For the first time, success felt incomplete. He picked up his phone and made a call. A decision was forming, one that would change more than just his own life. The decision he had started to form did not come all at once. It grew quietly, the way some truths do, shaped by small moments and uneasy thoughts. He carried it with him through meetings, through late dinners, through long drives where the city lights blurred past his window. At work, people noticed a change. He listened more. He interrupted less. When someone spoke, he no longer looked at his phone or the clock. It confused those who had known him as distant and exact. One afternoon, during a meeting that should have mattered to him, his mind drifted again to the park, to the old piano, to the way strangers gathered without being asked. He ended the meeting early. That same evening, he went to the park again. The sky was heavy with clouds, and the air smelled like rain. He half expected the piano to be covered or empty. She was there. This time, she wasn't playing. She sat on the bench beside the piano, watching a child press random keys and laugh at the sound. She smiled gently, guiding the child's hands now and then. He stood back and watched. She wasn't just sharing music, she was sharing space, patience, encouragement. When the child ran back to a waiting parent, she noticed him and raised a hand in greeting. "You look serious today," she said when he sat down beside her. "I feel serious," he replied. She waited. "I keep thinking about that night," he said. "About how easily I dismissed you." She nodded slowly. "Most people don't think about it afterward. That's the problem," he said. "I've done that my whole life." She studied his face. "And now, I don't want to anymore." The clouds finally opened, rain falling softly around them. People scattered, but they stayed. The piano keys darkened with water, yet no one rushed to cover them. "I want to help," he said suddenly. She turned toward him, cautious but calm. "Help how?" "There are people like you," he said. "Talented, hardworking, invisible. I see that now." She looked away, considering his words. "I don't need saving," she said quietly. "I know," he replied quickly. "That's not what I mean." He took a breath. "I want to create space. Real space. Places where people can be heard without having to prove they belong first." The rain softened, turning into a light mist. She met his eyes. "Why me?" "Because you reminded me of something I lost," he said. "And because you didn't ask for anything." They talked for a long time. About community centers that had closed. About schools without instruments. About young people who stopped trying because no one was listening. Her voice carried concern, not bitterness. "You can't control who shows up," she said. "Some will disappoint you." He nodded. "I'm used to disappointment. I'm not used to meaning." A week later, an old building near the park was unlocked for the first time in years. It wasn't fancy. The walls needed paint. The floor creaked. But inside, there was space. Pianos were moved in. So were chairs, music stands, and warm lights. No banners. No speeches, just open doors. She was hesitant at first. "This isn't about me," she reminded him. "I know," he said. "That's why it matters." Word spread slowly. Musicians came. Some trained, some self-taught, some confident, some afraid. She helped guide them, not as a leader above them, but as one among them. He watched from the edges, learning. There were awkward moments, off-key notes, empty afternoons, doubt, but there was also laughter, shared meals, music that filled the building in unexpected ways. One evening, a young man refused to play. Shaking with nerves, she sat beside him. "You don't owe anyone perfection," she said. "Just honesty." He played. The rich man felt something tighten in his chest again. He realized this was not charity. It was exchange. The restaurant manager visited one afternoon. "Curious, this place feels alive," he said. "It is," the rich man replied. The manager hesitated. "Would you consider bringing some of this back to the restaurant?" The idea lingered. A month later, the piano in the restaurant was no longer decoration. Different players came each week. No announcements, no dress code. Guests listened. Some complained at first. Others stayed longer than planned. On one quiet evening, she returned to that same piano. This time, no one doubted her. The rich man sat in the same place as before, but he was not the same man. As she played, he did not watch her hands. He watched the room, people leaning in, faces softening, barriers lowering. He understood then that the music was never just about sound. It was about permission. And for the first time in a long while, he felt proud of something that could not be measured. The evening the doors stayed open late. The city felt calmer than usual. Not quieter, just steadier. People drifted toward the old building near the park without signs telling them to. They came out of curiosity, or habit, or because someone they trusted had mentioned it once. Inside, warm light spilled across the floor. Chairs were arranged in a loose circle. The pianos had been tuned, but nothing else looked staged. No stage, no spotlight, just space. The rich man stood near the entrance, greeting people as they arrived. It still felt strange to him, this role. He wasn't directing anything. He was simply present. She arrived a little later, carrying a small bag of sheet music that looked worn at the edges. She smiled when she saw the room filling up. "You did this," she said softly. "We did," he replied. She nodded, accepting the correction. The evening began without announcement. A young woman played first, her hands shaking at the start, then steadying as the room leaned in. A man followed with a piece he had written himself, simple but honest. Applause came naturally, not forced. When it was her turn, she didn't rush. She waited until the room settled, until people felt ready. She sat at the piano and placed her hands on the keys. The first notes were gentle, almost unsure. Then they grew stronger, shaped by everything that had come before. Long nights, closed doors, unexpected chances. The music moved through the room like a shared memory. The rich man watched faces soften. He noticed small things now. A tired smile, a deep breath, someone wiping their eyes and not bothering to hide it. He realized this was the moment he had been searching for his entire life without knowing it. Not praise. Not control. Connection. When she finished, there was no rush to clap. The silence felt right. Then applause rose, warm and full. Wrapping around her, she stood and bowed slightly, her face calm. Grateful. After the music, people stayed. They talked. They laughed. They shared stories they hadn't planned to tell. The rich man moved through the room, listening. One person thanked him for the space. Another thanked her for the courage. Later, when most people had gone, they sat together near the piano. "I never planned any of this," she said. "Neither did I," he replied. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "I judged you," he said quietly. "And I was wrong." She looked at him. "You weren't the first. I hope I'll be one of the last," he said. She smiled. In the weeks that followed, the idea spread. Other spaces opened, not owned by him, but supported, guided by the same simple rule: everyone gets a chance. He still went to the restaurant sometimes. The piano there was played often now. Guests expected it. One evening, he noticed a woman standing near the entrance, dressed simply, looking unsure. Before anyone could question her, he approached. "Would you like to play?" he asked. Her eyes widened. "Me? Yes," he said. "If you want to." She nodded, nervous but hopeful. He stepped back and took his seat. As the first notes sounded, he smiled. He knew better now, not because he had learned to recognize talent at a glance, but because he had learned to wait and to listen. Some stories don't end with applause. They end with understanding. And that was enough.